Everything about the ROKS Cheonan suggested she could not be touched. A modern South Korean corvette with hull-mounted sonar, sailing in shallow water her crew knew by heart, and under the radar coverage of 3 separate shore stations. On the night of March 26, 2010, a North Korean midget submarine displacing 130 tons fired a single torpedo from less than 2 miles away. The Cheonan broke in half and sank in 7 minutes. 46 sailors died. The submarine returned to base. Nobody saw it go in. Nobody saw it come out. It was 21:22 on the evening of March 26, 2010. The Cheonan was on routine patrol 2.5 kilometers off the southwest coast of Baekneung Island, the northernmost piece of South Korean territory in the Yellow Sea. The water beneath her was 47 meters deep. The bridge crew had been tracking nothing all evening. The galley was preparing the late shift's meal. In the aft engine room, 6 sailors were on watch. The blast came from below. It lifted the stern of the corvette out of the water by an estimated 3 meters before slamming it back down. The hull, 1,200 tons of welded steel and aluminum superstructure, did not so much explode as separate. The stern section, with the engines and most of the off-duty crew, was on the seafloor within 90 seconds. The bow stayed afloat for 6 minutes more. By the time the Pohang-class corvette ROKS Sokcho arrived from 12 nautical miles east, there was nothing left to see except an oil slick and 46 men who would not be coming home. The Republic of Korea Navy in 2010 was not a minor force. It operated 3 Sejong the Great-class destroyers, each fitted with the Aegis combat system and 96 vertical launch cells, putting it on a tier with the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burkes. It operated 6 KDX-2 destroyers. It operated 9 frigates, 22 corvettes of the Pohang and Donghae classes, and a growing fleet of Type 2-14 submarines built under license from Germany. Total personnel approached 70,000. It had also been the most consistent partner of the United States Navy in anti-submarine warfare exercises since 1953. The Combined Forces Command in Yongsan held annual drills with U.S. 7th Fleet assets. Korean officers rotated through the U.S. Naval War College. Korean P-3C Orions flew patrols out of Pohang Naval Air Station with the same procedures, the same sonobuoys, and largely the same training pipeline as their American counterparts. The doctrine they had inherited was layered, methodical, and built around the threat profile of a modern Soviet or Chinese submarine. The northern limit line, where the Cheonan was patrolling, was the most heavily monitored stretch of water in the country. 3 shore-based radar stations covered the corridor. Republic of Korea Marine garrisons on Baekneung and Yeonpyeong held continuous watch. The textbook said nothing should be able to slip through. The textbook was about to be wrong. The Yeono-class submarine displaces 130 tons submerged. It is 29 meters long, 3.1 meters in beam, and carries 2 533mm torpedo tubes. Its diesel-electric power plant gives it roughly 4 knots while submerged on batteries, and a maximum range of 550 nautical miles. The crew is 2 officers and 5 enlisted men. It cannot dive below 150 meters. It has no air-independent propulsion, no anechoic coating, and no modern sonar suite. The Korean People's Navy operates roughly 10 of them. They were built at the Sinpyo South Shipyard in the late 1980s and early 1990s, based on the design of the Yugoslav Una class, a boat that the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia had developed for coastal infiltration in the Adriatic during the Tito years. Pyongyang acquired the plans through a transfer arrangement in 1985 and produced its own version with minor modifications for the deeper, colder water of the Yellow Sea. By any reasonable measure of submarine quality, The Yugoslav is obsolete. It is slow, noisy on the surface, and limited in endurance. The Cheonan's onboard sensors should have been able to detect it at 1,000 meters. The Cheonan never detected it. North Korea did not stumble into midget submarines. It chose them deliberately, and it chose them early. The decision dates to the late 1960s, when Kim Il-sung's general staff concluded that the Korean People's Navy could not compete with the South in conventional surface combat or in the air. What it could do was infiltrate. The doctrine that emerged was called underwater people's warfare, and it borrowed directly from the Soviet approach to the Baltic and the Yugoslav approach to the Dalmatian coast. By the early 1980s, the Korean People's Navy had built up the largest fleet of small submarines in the world. Sang-O-class boats for coastal raids, Yugo-class for special operations insertion, and eventually the Cheonan, designed specifically to navigate the shallow, current-cut corridors of the Yellow Sea that no Western analyst believed a submarine could operate in. The infiltrations were not theoretical. In September 1996, a Sang-O grounded near Gangneung while delivering a reconnaissance team to the South Korean coast. In June 1998, a Yugo-class became entangled in fishing nets off Sokcho, with all 9 crew found dead inside. The Cheonan had been used before March 2010, but it had never sunk a warship. That part of the doctrine was still theoretical, until it wasn't. The boat that sank the Cheonan left Pipago Naval Base on the night of March 25, 2010. Pipago sits on the west coast of North Korea, roughly 150 kilometers northwest of Baekneung Island, sailing submerged at 3 knots, hugging the contours of the seafloor at depths between 20 and 40 meters. The Cheonan crossed the northern limit line in the early hours of March 26 through a corridor that the JYG investigation later concluded had been pre-surveyed by the North Korean Hydrographic Service in 2008 and 2009. By midday on the 26th, the boat was in position. It chose a spot 1.8 kilometers off Baekneung's southwest cape in 47 meters of water directly beneath the thermal layer that formed every spring as cold meltwater from the Yalu River mixed with warmer surface flows. The thermal layer bent sound waves upward. Any sonar pulse the Cheonan emitted would skip over the submarine entirely. The Cheonan waited 16 hours. When the Cheonan crossed its bearing at 21:21, the captain fired 1 weapon. The torpedo was a CHT-02D, a Korean copy of a Soviet design, 53 centimeters in diameter, 250 kilograms of high explosive in the warhead, fitted with a magnetic non-contact fuse. It tracked acoustically for the last 600 meters. It detonated 3 meters beneath the corvette's keel. The bubble jet effect is what killed the ship. A non-contact detonation creates a gas bubble that rises, collapses, and rises again in a fraction of a second. The first rise lifts the hull. The collapse drops it into the resulting void. The second rise breaks the keel. The Cheonan came apart at frame 97. The Joint Civilian-Military Investigation Group convened within 48 hours. It included experts from South Korea, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Sweden. On May 20th, 2010, it released its findings. The cause was an external underwater explosion. The weapon was a CHT-02D torpedo. The origin was North Korea. The physical evidence was specific. Divers recovered the propeller shaft, the rear propulsion section, and part of the steering mechanism of the torpedo from the seabed. The propeller carried a Hangul marking matching the inventory codes used by the Korean People's Navy. Aluminum residue from the explosion was chemically matched to the aluminum oxide composition used in North Korean military explosives. Hydroacoustic and seismic signals recorded by South Korean and Russian stations were consistent with a single underwater detonation in the relevant kilogram range. China and Russia declined to endorse the findings. Russia conducted its own non-public review and reportedly suggested a mine. Beijing called for restraint. None of that changed the physical evidence on the seabed. The submarine was already home. The Republic of Korea Navy did not absorb the lesson quietly. Within 9 months, the Ministry of National Defense had published Defense Reform 307, a restructuring plan that tripled the anti-submarine warfare budget over 5 years. 2 new littoral anti-submarine warfare squadrons were established at Pyeongtaek and Donghae. The P-3C Orion fleet was upgraded to the CK standard. New Wildcat anti-submarine warfare helicopters were ordered. Shore-based variable-depth sonar arrays were installed along the northern limit line. The United States Navy paid closer attention than its public statements suggested. The Office of Naval Intelligence produced a classified case study on the Cheonan that circulated through Pacific Fleet Command in 2011 and 2012. The lesson was not that North Korea had a sophisticated submarine. The lesson was that an obsolete submarine in a well-chosen patch of water could defeat a modern anti-submarine warfare network. That lesson fed directly into the Doctrine being written for literal combat in the South China Sea, where the geography is similar and the operators are not friendly. A 130-ton boat had forced a $1 trillion alliance to rewrite the textbook. The metric that mattered was never tonnage. If you want more stories about the moments Doctrine quietly beat hardware, subscribe and stay with us. Next time, we go beneath the Sargasso Sea, where a single Soviet officer made the decision that kept Cuba from becoming the last thing any of us remembered. The wars are never won where the textbooks said they would be.